Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something that honestly feels like a superpower if you can harness it. Self-discipline.
Yeah, Leo Babauta actually calls it that. And when you think about it, it touches everything, doesn't it? Your health, money, all those projects you need to start.
Totally. His guide, a guide to developing the self-discipline habit, really lays out how powerful this can be.
And what I find interesting is how he looks at the flip side. Like, a lack of it isn't just neutral, it actively causes problems.
Right. Like health stuff, putting things off constantly, money worries, even just clutter everywhere.
Exactly. And underneath all that, often, is just feeling stuck. Like, where do I even begin?
Absolutely. So this deep dive isn't just about, try harder. We're really getting into the nuts and bolts of how you build this superpower.
We'll look at self-discipline itself, but also, crucially, courage and how we handle fear and anxiety, because those definitely get in the way.
Yeah, we've got Babauta's work, guidance from the Mental Health Foundation on fear, some really cool neuroscience on courage from a discussion with Dr. Andrew Huberman.
And also takes on resilience from places like Forbes and the Greater Good Science Center. So a real mix of perspectives.
Our mission really is to give you, the listener, some concrete takeaways. Actionable stuff from all these sources to help build not just discipline, but also that resilience you need when things feel scary or overwhelming.
Okay, so let's start with motivation, self-discipline.
Yeah.
Where does that initial drive actually come from? Babauta had some thoughts on this.
He talks about intrinsic motivators, right?
Yeah.
Not just forcing yourself.
Exactly. That basic human desire to, well, get better,
Yeah.
to grow. And he has this interesting angle, focusing on what hurts less right now.
What do you mean by that?
Well, instead of a massive, painful change, you kind of ease into the discomfort. Small steps. Make progress gradually so it doesn't feel like this huge shock to the system.
Ah, okay. So it's less about willpower and more about smart strategy, building up tolerance.
Precisely. And neuroscience kind of backs this up, you know. Small wins tap into our brain's reward system. It makes the whole process feel more doable, more self-sustaining.
He also mentions deeper motivations, like wanting to help people or just appreciating life more. Those felt quite powerful.
Yeah, that shifts the focus, doesn't it? It's not just about me. Like, getting healthier isn't just for you. Maybe it means you can be there more for your family, like aging parents.
Or pushing through on meaningful work actually benefits more people. It gives it a bigger why.
Right. It connects your effort to something larger than yourself and appreciating life.
Yeah.
That's about being present, using your time purposefully instead of just letting it drift by.
Okay, so we understand the why, but the how, taking that first step can feel monumental.
Absolutely. And Babauta's advice here is super practical. Start small, like really small.
Almost laughably small sometimes.
Kind of. Make the first action so easy it feels almost impossible not to do it. It's about lowering that barrier to entry, you know?
Like his examples. 5 minutes on taxes, not do taxes. A 10-minute run, not training for a marathon tomorrow.
Yeah. Just the first few paragraphs of a report declare 5 things. It's about getting the ball rolling. Psychology-wise, it bypasses that massive initial resistance we feel with big, daunting tasks.
You build momentum, and maybe more importantly, you build the habit of just starting.
Exactly. And breaking down bigger projects into those bite-sized pieces is key. It makes the overwhelming feel manageable.
Okay, small steps, got it. But discipline often means doing things that aren't fun, things that are uncomfortable. What about that?
Yeah, that's unavoidable. This is where Babauta brings in discomfort training.
Sounds intense.
It's actually about small doses. Intentionally leaning into slight discomfort, just a little at a time to get more used to the feeling.
Like building immunity or something.
Sort of, yeah. You're not trying to suddenly love discomfort, but just reducing its power over you. So when others might back away from something hard, you're a bit more willing to step into it.
How do you do that practically?
He suggests picking one small, mildly uncomfortable task and just notice your reaction. Often, the feeling isn't as bad as you anticipate. Then there's a mindfulness technique for dealing with those urges to just quit or check your phone.
Oh, I need that. That urge to escape when something gets tough is so strong sometimes.
Right. So the exercise is set a timer, maybe just 10 or 15 minutes. Focus only on the task. Or if the urge to avoid is overwhelming, just sit and observe the urge.
Just watch it without acting on it.
Exactly. See it, acknowledge it, but don't follow it. When the timer goes off, take a short break. Then repeat.
Ah, like interval training for your focus. building the muscle of not immediately giving in to the urge to run away.
You got it. It
Yeah.
creates that little bit of space between the feeling and your reaction.
Yeah.
Shows you have a choice, which leads us nicely into the next bit. How does this all connect to handling fear and anxiety?
Yeah, that feels like the missing piece. Because often, that lack of discipline is rooted in fear, isn't it? Fear of messing up or just anxiety about the task itself.
Definitely. And the mental health foundation guides we looked at make it clear. Feeling anxious or afraid in response to stress work, exams, money, relationships, that's normal.
But there's a difference between temporary fear and that ongoing anxiety that really drags you down.
Yes. And a key step the guides highlight is figuring out your triggers, what actually sets off that anxiety.
They have that thought exercise tool for digging into that, right?
Yeah, it's really useful. You think about a situation that made you anxious, identify the feelings, and then crucially, the negative thoughts that popped up.
Right.
Then you challenge those thoughts, what evidence actually supports them, but just as important, what evidence contradicts them.
Looking at both sides.
Right. And finally, you try to reframe the thought into something more balanced, more realistic. It's basically a core technique from cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
They gave that example. I made a mistake at work. Leads to thinking my colleague is judging me.
Yeah. Then you look for evidence. Okay, maybe the colleague seemed quiet. But wait, contradictory evidence? They're often quiet anyway. Or maybe they were just busy.
So you reframe it to something like, mistakes happen, it's okay, people usually understand.
Exactly. It's about consciously challenging those automatic negative thoughts that fuel the anxiety, taking back some control. Now, let's pivot slightly to the neuroscience side from that discussion with Dr. Andrew Huberman.
This is the really fascinating stuff, the brain bits involved in fear and courage.
Right. He talks about the amygdala, which is kind of the brain's fear center. But then there's this other area linked to courage and taking risks. In us, it's the central median nucleus of the thalamus.
Okay, so one part sounds the alarm and the other part, what does the courage part do?
Well, what's interesting is when they stimulated this courage area in humans, people reported feeling mild frustration and effort.
Not exactly euphoria.
No. Huberman thinks this might suggest there's an innate reward in the effort of confronting fear. Like our brains are wired to find some satisfaction in pushing against discomfort.
Wow, that changes how you think about it. Fear isn't just bad. Engaging with it might have its own kind of reward.
Potentially, yeah. And he also brings up hormesis.
Hormesis, what's that again?
It's the idea that a little bit of stress, a manageable amount, can actually make you stronger, more resilient. Like how exercise stresses your muscles to make them grow. Facing small fears might build psychological resilience.
Finding that sweet spot of challenge, not overwhelming stress.
Exactly. And Huberman's own story, that crazy diving incident with the great white sharks.
Yeah, that sounded terrifying.
Totally extreme. But it highlights how interpretation and training matter. He didn't just panic. His cognitive brain kicked in. He relates this to stress testing ourselves.
Pushing ourselves in smaller ways to see how we hold up under pressure, how we maintain our thinking.
Right. So taking all this, the brain science, Huberman's experience, how do we actually use this to build courage and resilience day to day?
Good question. Where do the other sources like Greater Good Science Center and Forbes come in?
Well, the Greater Good article suggests a two-step approach for thinking brave thoughts. First, just notice the fearful thoughts when they pop up.
Just see them like, there's that worried thought again.
Yeah. Don't automatically buy into it or act on it. Just label it. Then Martha Beck's advice is useful. Learn to tell the difference between true fear, like her scary neighbor example, genuine danger, and bogeyman fear.
Bogeyman fear being the kind that stops us from trying new things or growing.
Exactly. True fear makes you want to get out. Bogeyman fear often stops you from getting in. And then the Forbes article on resilience talks about reframing failures.
Not beating yourself up, but looking for the lesson. What did I learn? How can I grow from this?
Right. They even suggest asking questions like, how could this lesson help someone else? Who did I meet through this? How did I grow? It shifts the perspective entirely.
Turns a setback into data almost.
Kinda, yeah. And Forbes also stresses knowing your core values, what really matters to you, like authenticity, curiosity, whatever they are for you.
Having those as an anchor when things get tough, like Brene Brown's work.
Precisely. Your why keeps you going. And finally, a huge piece of resilience, connections. Building a support network. Knowing you're not alone makes a massive difference.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. Self-discipline, fear, anxiety, courage, resilience. How does it all weave together?
Well, if you think back to the beginning, those small actions and discomfort training for self-discipline, that builds the foundation.
Right. Practicing small acts of mastery makes bigger challenges seem less scary.
Exactly. You build confidence, a sense of capability, and that mindfulness technique for urges. You can use a similar approach for anxious thoughts.
Just observing them without reacting immediately.
Yeah, creates that space.
Hmm.
And the idea of seeing setbacks as learning opportunities, that pops up in both the discipline stuff and the resilience advice. It's about viewing failure not as the end, but as, well, part of the process. A
Yeah.
victory, even, as Bobata puts it.
Okay, so let's try to wrap this up for everyone listening. Key takeaways.
Well, first, self-discipline isn't some mystical trait. You build it with small, consistent actions and by gradually getting okay with discomfort. Second, managing fear and anxiety. It involves understanding your triggers, challenging negative thoughts, and knowing the difference between real danger and limiting beliefs.
And courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about noticing those non-brave thoughts and choosing your actions anyway. Resilience comes from learning from mistakes, knowing your values, and leaning on your connections.
Yeah, and crucially, these things are all linked. They feed into each other, creating this upward spiral towards feeling more capable and, well, better overall.
So the encouragement for you, the listener, is to maybe just experiment. Pick one small action. Try that mindfulness pause when an urge hits. Maybe do that thought exercise for one specific worry.
Exactly. Start small. And our final thought for you to chew on is this.
What if you intentionally chose just one small thing this minute that feels slightly uncomfortable? Or took one past failure and consciously looked for just one lesson learned? How might even that small act start to shift how you see yourself, your own strength, and maybe open up doors you thought were closed?